ঠিক স্যার এখানে
ও আচ্ছা
ওইদিকে আছে
ও এইভাবে
Good morning, everybody. Our honorable respected principal and all the distinguished dignitaries in the class, now the distinguished guests and the participants in today's workshop. Actually, the topic is already printed. There's ethical issues in medical research. But before that, we must understand whether we should have a recapitulation what actually ethics means. So, what Professor Mikey and the organizers talked to me, sir, we are talking about ethics, but ethics is essentially an issue of philosophy. Why don't you help us in discussing on this case? I said, okay, I will speak on philosophy of ethics. Which is a bit unfast and philosophy, always we think it is something high above our perception. It's not like that, it's very easy. So today, my topic of discussion is a core concept of ethics in the perspective of philosophy. I have dealt with Indian philosophy, but mostly with the Western philosophy. What does it mean? What is ethical? What is ethics? Because practically every section of our life, be it politics, be it medicine, be it anywhere, the basic principles do remain unchanged. Whatever be the critical application. Okay. So we will discuss upon the philosophy of the ethics. Next, please. Which one? Okay.
এখানে বলতে পারে না আচ্ছা আচ্ছা দাও তাহলে তো এখান দিয়ে দিতে পারি ওকে at the end of this session we will be able to define ethics classically classify the different types of ethical principles and apply these principles to different situations appropriately. What is ethics? It's a bit complex definition. Ethics is the subject discipline which deals with the innate cognito-affective faculty of healthy human mind to discriminate between right and wrong and tends to judge, listen the word, tends to judge human actions accordingly. It's a bit complex, there are few clauses. What is a faculty? It's an innate cognito-affective faculty. It's a human gift. Animals, they don't think about it. During the process of evolution, they did not develop this particular faculty, cognito-affective faculty. We know that we have 4 layers of brain. The innate, the most at the brain stem, we have the seat of life. Covering it is a reptilian brain, which we developed in the Jurassic age. The fire, the fear and anger and all the primary passions, and we have the amygdala, etc., etc. Basal ganglia. Then covering it, the mammals came in the process of evolution. We developed the affection, the limbic system developed, the mother tended to the baby for breastfeeding, and ultimately in the Homo sapiens level or in the higher primate level, we developed the cerebral cortex, which is the site of this cognito-affective faculty. So their control over the lower regions are inhibitory. So we don't discuss these things nowadays very much because this is where newer models have come. The id, ego, and superego. So id is our basal ganglia, the passion, anger, the basic instincts, everything is there in the basal ganglia. Then controlling this, that's our emotion, limbic system. And then ultimately we analyze it by cognito-affective faculty of our cerebral cortex, and we exhibit our inhibitory control over the lower centers, and we don't behave in an animal way. So that is the actually mechanism, biological mechanism of development of ethics in our brain. It's a healthy human mind to discriminate between right and wrong and tends to judge human actions accordingly. Now distinguish between right and wrong. The concept, the problem with us is what is right and what is wrong. Is it a universal thing? over the ages, or we decide about the right and wrong according to the available situation. Okay, let's see. So there are different classical descriptions of ethics in the terms of philosophy. First is called a normative ethics. Normative ethics means what ought to be. It should be. We always say that you shouldn't have done this should have been like this. So that is called a normative ethics. We identify certain norms. So search for norms, not in the sense of word is average, but in the sense of authoritative standard of what is ought to be. What we are doing, that doesn't matter, but what should be, what should we be doing? That is called a normative ethics. Second is a descriptive ethics, what we describe about the actions and thoughts. So empirically based aims to discover and describe the moral beliefs in a specific culture. So descriptive ethics. What was ethical in the Hottentots or what is ethical in the Zulus may not be equally ethical in our context. So that is the part of the descriptive ethics. We always discuss about it. Jateshe Joshminachara. It is quite ethical to have such and such things in that particular space, time and person. But in the current space, time and person, these things are not ethical. Coming to the metaethics, this is the study of the discipline of ethics. It attempts to determine the meanings of normative terms, right, wrong, good, bad, ought, because they are changing over the time. They're changing over the time. So we study the ethics in the ancient system, medieval system, modern system, and the system and with the mechanism with which we study the evolution of ethics. That is a part of metaethics. Different ethical standards are there. Suppose Indian constitution is there, which is an ethical document. So there were constitutions beforehand also. In the Roman period, in the Greek period, they had their own constitution to run the country. So if we analyze those ethical principles now with some cognitive faculty, that will be a metaethical concept. So historical stages of ethics. To start with, what is good for us? Previously, people used to say, what gives pleasure to my body? Bodily pleasure. That means animal existence. In our Indian terms, we say ahar, nidra, moithun, kam, krodh, lobh, moho, moth, matshurja. What gratifies our animal needs, that is right. That is called a hedonistic state of ethics. Gradually, we understood that I cannot remain happy alone. I need my people around me, they should also be happy. So that happiness of physical pleasure, hunger, gratification of hunger, gratification of animal lust, everything is natural to our existence. So these things should be available to everyone. So that is kind of altruistic hedonism. Gradually we understood that physical pleasure has its limitation. We need the intellectual pleasure. We need some intellectual pleasure, and that is the Epicurean school of Greek philosophy developed. So this is called Epicureanism. Mind being superior to body, whatever is pleasant to not only my body, but also to mind. Sometimes we are hungry, but we give our plate of food to a hungry person. What pleasure do we get? We don't get the pleasure of gratifying our hunger. But as the hungry man is eating in front of me, I get a mental pleasure. That is the Epicurean principle of ethics is coming in. Okay. Now, stages of ethics. If we develop these things to a higher organized thinking, the two major schools are there. First is utilitarianism. Whatever is good for the maximum number of people, that is right and desirable. Bahujana hitaya, bahujana sukhaya. And that is the principle upon which democracy operates. What is good for maximum, we should decide on that. So that is utilitarianism. That may not be absolutely right. Suppose in a piece of in a community, you decide for something. Some people will be sufferers. Even for if you construct a road here, maximum number of people will be benefited, but a few people will be at a loss when their roads will be raised to, when their houses will be raised to ground and their cultivation fields will be occupied by that road. But bahujana hitaya, bahujana sukhaya. That is the principle of utilitarianism. Second principle is the absolutely other side of the story is deontological ethics, duty-bound ethics. Don't look at the result. Be on duty. Suppose I never speak a falsehood. So that is my deontological ethics. But it has its limitations. Suppose a terrorist comes and asks me to identify one of my friends. Then identify karo amra oke chaichi. Should I speak truth? If I speak a truth, I will be doing greater disservice to human existence. But deontological ethics says no, don't concerned about the result. You always follow your duty. So that is another aspect. So deontological ethics on one end, that is the path is important, not your result. And the second is a utilitarian ethics. What is the result? If the result is good for maximum people, do that. So these are the two extremes of our ethical spectrum. Now, normative ethics, there are major theories are there. They are mostly theoretical part. Consequentialist maintains the morality of an action determined by its consequences, which is basically the core principle of utilitarianism. Teleological theories interpret moral judgments dependent on values and evaluation. Hinging on the value theory, hedonism is the value theory, says only pleasure is good at the end. And this is the guiding principle of utilitarianism. আরে অধিকাংশ লোকের তো ভালো হলো, তাহলে রাস্তাটা তৈরি করা ঠিকই ছিল। 20টা লোকের বাড়ির উপর দিয়ে ভেঙে বেরিয়ে গেল, ছেড়ে দাও, ignore it. So this is the principle of utilitarianism which we understand all. Now, second principle, utilitarianism is hedonistic because it interprets happiness as a balance of pleasure over pain. Ideal or social utilitarianism is non-hedonistic, maintaining that one ought to do that act of all acts available under the circumstances that would produce the most good. Bahujana hitaya, bahujana sithaya, that is the guiding principle of ideal social utilitarianism. Now, focus, what are the characteristics of utilitarianism? Focus on outcomes, not on motivations. What is the metric or goal here? Need an important distinction. It is very difficult to say, ajke jeta bhalo bole korlam, seta shotti shotti bhalo kina. Time we can only say. So utilitarianism has got some temporal barriers. It is instrumental or intrinsic good. এটা কি শুধুমাত্র প্রকারে একটা ভালো জিনিস হলো, রাস্তা তো হয়েছে, ভালোই তো হলো। But say in a long term there will be destruction. If you increase your infrastructure indiscriminately, there will be destruction of environment, which may cause a lot of disturbance in future. যে ইনফ্রাস্ট্রাকচার তৈরি হয়েছে খুব বেশি রকমের যদি বিস্তৃতি ঘটে থাকে, তাহলে এনভায়রনমেন্টের যে ক্ষতি হবে সেটা কিন্তু স্থায়ী। তখন কিন্তু বহুজনের সুখায় বহুজনের হিতায় আজ থেকে 100 বছর বা 200 বছর মধ্যে হবে না। But that is difficult to decide at this particular moment of time. Many laws are based on utilitarianism. Actually, most laws are based on utilitarianism. খুন করা ভালো না খারাপ, আমি যদি আপনাকে জিজ্ঞেস করি, কাউকে জিজ্ঞেস করি, হ্যাঁ মানুষ নরহত্যা করা খুব খারাপ জিনিস, তাহলে ফাঁসি দেওয়া হয় কেন? তাহলে যুদ্ধ হয় কেন? তার মানে অ্যাবসলিউট গুড বা অ্যাবসলিউট ব্যাড এর প্রশ্ন এখানে আসছে না। সো দ্য অ্যাবসলিউট গুড এন্ড অ্যাবসলিউট ব্যাড we are not dealing with. Many laws are based on like that. Emphasis on act and means the net impact is no concern about the rules. Rules depends upon the available situation. Now, level of ethical control. We act. Suppose I am taking this in my hand. This is action. Can we say whether it is good or bad? Difficult to say. There may be a rule. Suppose the organizer and these things, they have made a rule. You should not take this particular mouse in your hand. So, rule will control my action. We all understand that. In every day, the parliament, our assembly, they are passing acts. Acts means correction of rules. That you shouldn't do this thing, you shouldn't do these things, you should do this thing, you shouldn't do these things. You shouldn't take the mouse in your hand. You shouldn't operate like that. You should not do these things. These are part of our rules to control our actions. But rules are also controlled by the maxim of ethics. Suppose there is a law or a particular act which is passed in the Parliament of India, but you can challenge it, taking into consideration that this particular act which has been passed by the Parliament is contravening the principle in the maxim of ethics, which is Indian Constitution. So you can challenge an act if it is anti-constitutional. So that has to be interpreted. The constitutional bench will sit and such instances are there, that many acts passed by the central government or the Parliament of India that has been ousted by the Supreme Court, the constitutional bench, because this is the control of the second level, the maxim of ethics. Now, active. Therefore, utilitarianism, one of the major school, they can be applied in different stages, at the level of action, at the level of rules, at the level of maxim. So, state wants to replace a curvy stretch of highway along the outskirts of a town with a new, more straight roadway. Is building the highway a good action? Benefit versus costs, unhappiness. Costs ato, benefit ato. Cost, eminent domain of 150 homes, noshto hoye jabe. Then, so you can evaluate what is the financial, you can measure that what is the loss and what is the gain. That is one measure. But Bentham, actually, Bentham, he has proposed for a hedonistic calculus. There are 7 points. That if you say that this is happy, there are 7 points. That is pureness of happiness. Is it devoid of any unhappiness? In this way, there are 7 calculating points for how good it is. That is called hedonistic calculus. Hedonistic calculus by Bentham. So in this way, we can analyze our acts on the basis of the principle of utilitarianism. Now, you can also analyze the rule. Still focused on consequences. Adopt moral rules that, when followed by everyone, lead to greatest happiness. There is one principle: certain actions decrease happiness, so we devise rules against them, more strict than active utilitarianism. When you apply the principle of utilitarianism to control your rules, that is much more strict action. That you can't do these things, okay? Or you should do maximum benefit to maximum number of people. Example: Blaster worm infected millions of PC. Nazi worm, the ethical hackers are justified, though hacking remains an offense. You see, hacking is an offense. Internationally, it's an offense. But at the same time, the authority, they are employing ethical hackers. So this is contradictory. How can hacking be ethical? But the ethical point is, if I create a helpful worm that destroys a harmful worm, it's ethical. Bahujana hitaya, bahujana sukhaya. Terrorism do operate in the same ethical principles. আমরা টেররিস্টদের গালাগাল করছি যে তোমরা আজকে ওই 11/9 এ বিল্ডিংটা উড়িয়ে দিলে, এতগুলো মানুষ মারা গেল, এতগুলো মানুষকে মেরে দিলে, বলে আমাদের তো একটা খুব, we also act ethical. We have our own principles to define. So in this way, যখন আমরা অ্যান্টি টেররিস্ট মুভমেন্ট সারা ওয়ার্ল্ড জুড়ে চলছে, আমরা কি বলছি? Bahujana hitaya, bahujana sukhaya. So simple principle of utilitarianism. Then this I was talking about, hedonic calculus, formulated by Bentham, used by the school of utilitarianism to measure, it can be measured, how much pleasure or actions can create. Actions are good if they exhibit maximum pleasure and minimize pain. Stuart Mill suggested hierarchy of pleasure and went to quality over quantity. Then Mill classified intellectual pleasure as superior to base animal pleasures. That is Epicurean principles operated. Now, what are the 7 points upon which we say that this is a good work? This is something very good. Number 1, intensity. Intensity of the pleasure. Number 2, duration of the pleasure. Number 3, certainty of the pleasure. If I take this particular medicine, I will get some relief. So certainty, there must be certainty of pleasure. Number 4, propinquity or remoteness. আজকে একটা ওষুধ খেলাম, 15 বছর বাদে তার কাজ হবে। That is not a very good. আর একটা ওষুধ খেলাম যেটা 3 দিনের মধ্যে কাজ হবে। Which one is acceptable to me? Obviously যেটা 3 দিনের মধ্যে কাজ হবে. So propinquity or of the particular pleasure. Fecundity. শুধু ওষুধটা খেলে 3 দিনের মধ্যে আমি ভালোই হব না, আমার আরো ইমপ্রুভমেন্ট করবে। আর ওই ওষুধটা খেলে শুধু ওই প্রবলেমটাই মিটবে। তাহলে this one is pleasure most acceptable. কারণ it has got fecundity. One pleasure can lead to multiple number of pleasures. Number 1 is pure pleasure, purity. You can take this particular medicine, but at the same time you will have side effect. But if you take this medicine, there will be no side effect. So purity of pleasure. Pleasure should not be rather combined with some elements of unpleasure. So that is called purity. And last is extent. How many people will be affected? So in this way, philosopher Bentham devised the hedonic calculus to justify an action of ethical and pleasant. Coming to the another part of the spectrum, deontological ethics, Kant, Kantian. We also call Kantian ethics. We also say it's a Kantian ethics. What is good, that is good, immaterial of the result. Actions are guided by moral laws. Morality must be based upon reason. Can explain why an action is right or wrong. আচ্ছা এটাকে তুলে নিয়ে যেখানে রাখলাম, এটা জাস্টিফাইড অ্যাকশনটাই বলছি না, এটা রাখা যায়, কোনো অসুবিধা নেই। আচ্ছা এটা যদি তুলে রাখলে পরে বহু লোকের ক্ষতি হয়, লিভ ইট। অ্যাকশন ইজ গুড, Result is immaterial to me. Places emphasis on duty and rules that should be followed, ignores consequences. এটা সাধারণ মানুষ খুব বোঝে। এই ডিওন্টোলজিক্যাল এথিক্স, গান্ধীয়ান এথিক্স সাধারণ মানুষ খুব বোঝে। সারা জীবন মিথ্যে কথা বলে গেল, লোকের পিছনে কাঠি করে গেল, কিন্তু তিনি সারা জীবন নিরামিষ খেয়েছেন। মানে অ্যাকচুয়ালি she or he or she is following a deontological ethics. আমি সারা জীবন নিরামিষ খাই, সারা জীবন খুব শুদ্ধ সত্য জীবন। হিটলার তো শুনেছি নিরামিষী ছিল, মাংস খেত না। But what action did he do? He was very ethical in one part, but another part was absolutely unethical. So deontological ethics সাধারণ মানুষ খুব সহজে বোঝে, কারণ ওইটুকুর মধ্যেই ওটা লিমিটেড। সে লং টার্ম রেজাল্টের দিকে তাকায় না, যে লং টার্ম রেজাল্ট এটার কি হবে সেটার দিকে তাকায় না। তাকানোর সম্ভাবনায় তার পক্ষে, তার সেই স্প্যান অফ নলেজ or that forevision, it is absent in common people. So it is very well understood by আমি কিছু জানি না, আমি একটা পার্টিকুলার জিনিস ফলো করি, আমি কিন্তু সাদা শাড়ি ছাড়া কিছু পরি না। People understand that. যে ওই ভদ্রমহিলা কিন্তু যাই ভদ্রলোক ভদ্রমহিলা যাই ইচ্ছে করে সাদা শাড়ি পরে, এইভাবে আমরা বলি আর কি। বাকি কি অ্যাকশন আমার দেখার দরকার নেই। So this is a called deontological ethics. Common people to understand this very well. Now, what is always good without classification, without qualification? How about intelligence and courage? So some questions will be raised. In what ways might this be not good? ওই যে বললাম, কাউকে দান করা পুণ্য, কাউকে দান করা পুণ্য। আমি যদি শুধু এইটুকু নিই, তাহলে যে লোকটা ঘর চালানোর জন্য দেশলাই চাইছে আমার কাছে, তাকে দেশলাই দান করাটাও পুণ্য। So deontological ethics also has got a major limitations. Major limitations. Only answer to what is always good is a goodwill. আমার মনে খুব ভালো ইচ্ছে আছে, বহু লোকের ভালো হোক, বহু লোকের মঙ্গল হোক, এইটুকুই শুধু ভালো। কিছু করতে গেলেই বিপদ, কোন কাজে যে লং টার্ম কি অ্যাকশন হবে আমরা নিজেরাও জানি না। Even if goodwill leads to unintended outcomes, it always happens. Principle there, let me quote from history. Many of you remember the Chauri Chaura incidents. I think you remember the Chauri Chaura incidents. Gandhiji declared non-violent non-cooperation all over the country, and people say that if this movement was not withdrawn, probably India would have been independent in 1921. But what happened in one spot in Chauri Chaura of Uttar Pradesh, UP, there was an incidence of violence where violent mob actually set flame on a police outpost and few of the police personnel were killed. And that single incidence, based on that single incidence, Gandhiji said that my principle of non-violence is violated. So I will withdraw the whole movement from the country. Everybody said, Gandhiji, don't do it. It's a stray incident. Well, no. My principle is a deontological ethics. It cannot accept any exception or any failure or any loophole. So I will withdraw. He withdrew. And we know what were the results. So this is called the limitation of deontological ethics. It is non-consequentialist. It doesn't concerned about the result. যা ইচ্ছে হোক, আমি দেখলে একটা দান করা পুণ্য ছিল, আমি দান করেছি। ও ঘর জ্বালানো কি করলো এটা আমার দেখার দরকার নেই। পরে সে বলে, মশাই আপনি দেশলাইটা দিলেন কেন? তো ঘর জ্বালিয়েছে। আমার তো দরকার নেই, আমি দান করাটা পুণ্য, আমি ওইটুকুই করেছি। So if we decide our actions only on the basis of the duty is good, কাজটা খুব ভালো করেছি, দান করেছি, then I am non-consequentialist, মানে আমি তার রেজাল্টটা দেখছি না। So deontological theories claim that the morality of an action depends on the intrinsic nature itself. শুধু কাজটুকুই পুণ্য, its motives, but রেজাল্টটা আমার কাছে I am not concerned about, or on its being on record, এটা খুব ভালো কাজ, দান করাটা খুব পুণ্য, এটা লোকে বলে গেছে, আমার বাবা বলে গেছেন, বাবার পর ঠাকুর দাদা বলে গেছেন, করতে 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 কেউ একটা বলে গেছেন, তার মানে আমাকে একটা আলটিমেট অথরিটির উপর ডিপেন্ড করতে হচ্ছে যে হ্যাঁ এই কাজটা ভালো। দ্য থিওলজিক্যালি, এখানেই থিওলজির প্রশ্ন চলে আসে। Divine command theory maintains that it's the will of God that determines the rightness or wrongness of action. It is in accord with the will of God, as said by St. Augustine. Levels act deontology, rule deontology. As you can understand, utilitarianism can be applied at the level of the action, at the level of the rule. Similarly, deontology can be applied at the level of the action as well as the level of rule. আমি তাড়াতাড়ি করছি, ফার্স্ট একটু মানে ক্রিটিক্যাল টপিকটা আমি খুব ফাস্ট চলে যাচ্ছি। You know what are the characteristics of deontological ethics? Familiar struggle between what we all want to do and we ought to do. Okay, a dutiful person ইউনিভার্সালিটি অফ ডিউটি, ক্যাটেগরিক্যাল ইম্পারেটিভ। লাস্ট লাইনটা দেখুন, ক্যাটেগরিক্যাল ইম্পারেটিভ। এইটাই কান্টের কোর, যে এই কাজটা যে ভালো আমি কি করে বুঝবো? শুনুন, এই কাজটা না এর সঙ্গে মিলছে, তাই এটা ভালো। আচ্ছা, ওটা কার সঙ্গে মিলছে? মিলতে 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 একবার কোথাও গিয়ে দেওয়ালে পিঠ ঠেকবে। হোয়াট ইজ দ্যাট দেওয়ালে পিঠ ঠেকা? ক্যাটেগরিক্যাল ইম্পারেটিভ। কান্টের তিনটে ক্যাটেগরিক্যাল ইম্পারেটিভ। আমি একদম ডাইরেক্টলি ওখানে চলে যাচ্ছি। ডিওন্টোলজিক্যাল এথিক্সে কিছু অ্যাডভান্টেজ আছে, সাধারণ মানুষকে বোঝানো সুবিধা হয়। শোনো বাবু, এটা করো না। Disadvantage: no single rule characterizes all actions. No way of resolve conflicts among rules. No exception to moral laws. Now, categorical imperative. এই তিনটে categorical imperative Kant বললেন, believe in absolute goodness, summum bonum. Believe in absolute goodness. একটা কোথাও সবচেয়ে ভালো, সবার চেয়ে ভালো, সবকিছু ভালো একটা কিছু আছে। That is called absolute goodness. Believe in the freedom of will. আমার ইচ্ছে করলেই আমার সমস্ত কাজ, আমার freedom of will আছে। সত্যি সত্যি কিন্তু নেই, ভালো করে ভেবে দেখলে। আর believes in the immortality of ethical research. বলছে এটা ethical search। আমি আমার ইহজন্মে না পেতে পারি, পরজন্মে নিশ্চয়ই পাবো, তারপরের জন্মে নিশ্চয়ই সেই সত্যে পৌঁছবো, তারপরের জন্মে নিশ্চয়ই। সো ইট ইজ an immortality. আমি না পৌঁছই, আমার নেক্সট জেনারেশন পৌঁছবে, তারপরে তার পরের জেনারেশন অফ পিপল পৌঁছবে। somewhere we will reach the absolute summum bonum. এটা এক্সাম্পলটা খালি বলছি। ভীষ্ম ইন মহাভারত, জাস্ট টু স্টিক টু দ্য প্রমিসেস, বলে মহাভারতের যুদ্ধ হয়েছিল ভীষ্মের এই তিনটে প্রতিজ্ঞার জন্য। এক নম্বর, আমি কোনোদিন হস্তিনাপুরের সিংহাসনে বসবো না, আপনারা জানেন সব কাহিনীটা। সেকেন্ড থিং, তা বললো যে তুমি যে বসবে না তো বুঝলাম, কিন্তু আমার ছেলেপুলে কি বলে, তুমি যদি সিংহাসনে না বসে তার বিরোধিতা করো, সেকেন্ড থিং, আই উইল রিমেন লয়াল টু দ্য থ্রোন। আমি কোনোদিন বিরোধিতা করবো না। আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, তুমি না হয় না করলে, তোমার ছেলেপুলেরা যদি করে আমি বিয়েই করবো। সো দিস থ্রি প্রিন্সিপলস ডিওন্টোলজিক্যাল এথিক্স। আমরা জানি এই তিনটে প্রিন্সিপল যদি ভীষ্ম ভাঙতেন, তাহলে মহাকুরুক্ষেত্রের 11-18 লক্ষ হিন্দু সৈন্য মরত না, কারণ মহাভারতের যুদ্ধটাই হতো না। মহাভারতের খুব সুন্দর এক্সাম্পল এটা, যে ভীষ্মের জন্যই, ভীষ্মের এই তিনটে প্রতিজ্ঞাই কিন্তু মহাভারতের কুরুক্ষেত্র যুদ্ধের আসল কারণ। সেকেন্ড পার্ট, আরেকটা এক্সাম্পল হচ্ছে গান্ধিয়ান এথিক্স। আমি জানি চৌরি চৌরার গল্পটা আমি আপনাদের অলরেডি বলেছি। এবারে কথা হচ্ছে যে দুটোই তো দরকার, আমাদের ব্যালেন্স করতে হবে, utilitarianism and deontological ethics. আমরা যদি খুব বেশি, if we extend our utilitarianism, that will lead to opportunism. Opportunism মানে আমার একটা নিহিত স্বার্থ আছে, নেতা বলছে শুনুন বহু মানুষের ভালো হবে ওই জন্য রাস্তাটা করা হচ্ছে, আসলে রাস্তাটা আমার ঠিক বাড়ির সামনে দিয়ে যাবে, আমার প্লটটা বাঁচিয়ে করেছি। সো ইট উইল লিড টু অপরচুনিজম। অর্থাৎ যিনি প্রিচ করছেন তার নিহিত স্বার্থ, যার জন্য মহাভারতে শ্রীকৃষ্ণ হচ্ছেন একদম আদার সাইড, ইউটিলিটারিয়ানিজম। এই মুহূর্তেটা ভালো, জরাসন্ধকে মারতে হবে, তার জন্য যদি একটু ছলের রূপ নিতে হয় নাও, দ্রোণকে মারতে হবে, তার জন্য যদি একটু মিথ্যে কথা বলতে হয় বলো, বেটার গুড হবে, বহুজনের হিতায় হবে। So Bhishma and Krishna, they are the two extremes of Mahabharata ethical principles. Deontological ethics, if hyperextended to extremes, will result in blind dogma. We know that. Last is the situational ethics. আমরা দুটোর মাঝখানে ব্যালেন্স করি, এটা রলস থিওরির উপরে, এটা যদি কখনো ডিটেল হয়, egoism, situationism, এগুলো সমস্ত fractional definition on ethical principles. Rawls and Hobbes' theory on social contract theory, it's right to me to act according to moral rule if rational people would collectively accept as binding because of its benefit to the community. So this is the definition given by Rawls. Social contract theory, আমি খুব ফাস্ট যাচ্ছি, এগুলো অ্যাকচুয়ালি postmodernist period. In the postmodernist period, the classical, if we go to the classical schools of philosophy, we will see that how the ethics have evolved over the different times, over the evolution of ethics along the newer schools of philosophy. Social contract principle, I'm just going fast. There are certain drawbacks also. Over utilitarianism and over deontological ethics both have problems. Summary, we have several workable theories. This is the one thing. So ethics, ethical schools does not have a single ethical rule. Accept that. It depends on so many factors. So we have several workable theories and we have to share it. There are important issues and distinctions. Surrogacy, this LGBTQ, the cross surrogacy, single gender parenthood, This single gender marriage, all these things are ethical issues to us. Cloning, human cloning, the euthanasia, everything is an ethical issue. Every medical question is riddled with ethical issues. And we have to analyze that particular thing according to the available context to us. What may be right and acceptable in a society may not be equally acceptable in another society. So it has got socio-cultural, political, economic constraints and constructs. So we have to decide accordingly. So these are the in a summary: the theory, motivation, criteria, and focus. The comparison of different schools of ethics. And we have to look forward. Workable theories, we have 4 workable theories. None is perfect. Each has flaws. We need to decide when to apply each, and we attempt to fill policy vacuums. Technology is the single greatest force. Yes. আজ থেকে 100 বছর আগে সারোগেসি নিয়ে ভাবতে হয়নি, ক্লোনিং নিয়ে ভাবতে হয়নি, ইনভিট্রো ফার্টিলাইজেশন নিয়ে ভাবতে হয়নি, গে ম্যারেজ নিয়ে ভাবতে হয়নি, এলজিবিটিকিউ নিয়ে ভাবতে হয়নি, কারণ সেগুলো টেকনোলজি যত ডেভেলপ করছে ততই জিনিসগুলো আমাদের সামনে চলে আসছে, সোসাইটি চেঞ্জ করছে। কামিং টু লাস্ট, মেটাএথিক্স, আমি ডিটেলে যাচ্ছি না। ন্যাচারালিজম, কমিউনিটিজম, এগুলো সমস্ত মেটাএথিক্স, অর্থাৎ এথিক্যাল স্কুলস, দ্য এথিক্যাল প্রিন্সিপলস গুলোকে জাজ করবার জন্য যে সাবজেক্টটা, দ্যাট ইজ মেটাএথিক্স। সেখানে অনেকগুলো সাবডিভিশন আছে। ন্যাচারালিজম, নেচারে যা কিছু হয় সবই ভালো। prominent medical ethical issues যেগুলো নিয়ে আমরা খুব ডিল করি: ইউথ্যানেশিয়া, অ্যাবর্শন, ক্লোনিং, ইউজেনিক্স, reproductive technologies, organ donation, brain death. We know that they are all basically ethical issues. Now take home messages. Ethics is all pervasive awareness. There is nothing called an ethical holiday. আমি একটা জায়গায় খুব ethical আর একটা জায়গায় unethical এরকম হয় না। If I am an ethical person, I should discuss about the ethics, and I should act accordingly in every sphere. Ethics has evolved over the cultures from simple concepts to complex disciplines. 2 major schools: result-oriented evaluation and method-oriented evaluation, utilitarianism and deontological ethics. We must balance between the two to have a pragmatic approach. If you are interested, books are there: Frankena, McKenzie, Immanuel Kant, Critic of. These 2 books are very good. I have gone through it in details: Critic of Pure Reason and Critic of Practical Reason, and Bioethics by Beauchamp. Those who are interested in bioethics, you can read the book on Beauchamp and Barnard Lowe. Thank you very much. I know that this subject is a bit complex because we are not very comfortable to read, but just briefly, I also had the same concept before I entered into this particular topic. But when I went through McKenzie and when I went through Barnard, Beauchamp, and all these books on bioethics, I did a workshop on ICMR. Then my eyes opened that the philosophy of ethics is to understand the core principles of ethics. Then and then we can apply